Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. Today's is one where I want your input on this. I've gotten a lot of questions recently, almost to the point where it feels like something is out in the universe, because I've gotten a lot of questions regarding whether I use snaps or whether I use O-rings on my crankbaits. And what I mean by that is if you look at this crankbait right here, there is a O-ring that is your connection point. If you look at this slobber knocker right here, you've got a snap right there. And whether or not I think that makes any sort of difference as to performance of the bait, if I prefer one over the other, which I like to go with. And the reason I say this is funny and I think there's something in the universe is because this is probably over the last 3 or 4 days, I've had probably 5 or 6 questions in the comment sections of YouTube videos that were not related at all to snaps or swivels. But like the day before the first comment I got, I was in a text chain with Austin Felix, one of my buddies who fishes the Elite Series, and we started talking about whether you use snaps or O-rings. And it was funny because he had some really valuable points, and I feel like I've got some valuable points. And ultimately, I want to know what you guys have to say with this. So, in a nutshell, when I was talking to Austin about it, he said he will not use snaps at all. He is firmly against them, and it has to do with the fact that he lost a fish, a big 4 pound class fish in one of his tournaments where the snap opened up, his bait pulled off, he got his line back with just the snap, and it cost him a $10,000 check. So he does not want to use them at all. I'm firm believer that you get better motion using a snap like that versus using the O-ring. And I feel like that's because your snap, when you compare it in diameter, is basically half the width of an O-ring because an O-ring is several wraps of the same wire basically. So it's thicker, and because it's thicker, it has less ability to move freely, whether it's on the, the your whatever your connection point is, your ring of the bait, or whether, it's just a flatter surface which doesn't allow your bait to move as much. Now, having said that, I don't think it makes a huge impact, but I do think you get more erratic motion by using a snap. But Austin's point is extremely valuable, and it is something I have thought about in the past. Basically, what it comes down to is what are the conditions that I'm fishing? What is the situation? Meaning, if I'm out in practice, I love using a snap because that snap allows me to change baits very, very quickly. I mean, if I'm throwing crankbaits and it's during practice for a tournament or I'm just out fun fishing, by the end of the day, I might have 25 crankbaits laying in a pile in the boat just because I was rotating through different styles of baits, different colors, different diving depths, trying to hone it in on that day. Now, at the same time, it's not a huge time saver, but when it's during practice and I'm just out trying to figure out what the fish are doing or I'm out fun fishing, it does save me some time. And from that standpoint, it's less work to have to tie knots. In some of those situations, maybe it's a really windy day, maybe it's a cold day, maybe it's a rainy day, and the last thing you want to be doing is trying to tie knots in some tough conditions. But having said that, I agree with what Austin says very, very much. In a tournament situation, the snaps are not 100% reliable. There are some good snaps out there. If you go to Tackle Warehouse, you can find there's a bunch of snaps that do have some safety measures built in, but I have yet to find one that can't open on its own right. Now, I can't sit here and say I've ever lost a 4,000, a 4 pound fish or a big fish that's cost me a good check in a tournament. But I can tell you, I have cast off a lot of baits over the years where you go to make a cast, you retrieve it back, and it's like you come back and all you've got is the snap. So at some point, that snap opened up. It could have been open for 50 casts for all I knew before that bait came off. But the real, the realistic, there are realistic chances that you can potentially lose a big fish because of it. So in a tournament situation, I do tend to go with the O-rings in most situations because they are foolproof. Like I have not had an O-ring that opened up on me or broke on me where I've lost the fish or cast the bait off. Now, if you are not careful and you really tried to stretch an O-ring out, you can separate them and have your knot slide through it. I have had that happen before when I was using uh, O-rings that were just overused and I shouldn't have been using, and I just, I didn't care at the time. It was more of just out fun fishing, doing whatever. I would not do that in a tournament situation, but it is something to keep in mind. But again, it does depend on the bait. For example, if I'm throwing blade baits, I'm throwing a snap. And that just simply has to do with the fact that it's very difficult to get an O-ring on a blade bait because of a couple of things. One, if you can see it, the hole point is almost too small for most O-rings. And at the same time, there's enough width there where it's really difficult to get an O-ring on that. When you're trying to get an O-ring on a large hook hanger or just through a bigger gap, like it's a big issue. If you tried to put an O-ring on a slobber knocker or your chatterbaits, it can be very, very difficult to the point where it's not worth even trying. But again, if you can get an O-ring in place of it, it's something you might want to think about, especially if you're talking about in a situation where every fish matters, where you don't want to take the chance of losing one. So I'm curious to hear from you guys. Like, what is your overall take? For me, I like using snaps when I'm out fun fishing, when I'm covering water, when I'm out practicing for tournaments, and I know I'm just going to be rotating through a bunch of baits. I definitely do throw snaps. I think they're easier to use. I think they're performance wise, with some of the better snaps that are on the market, you can get really good performance out of your baits. But having said that, in a tournament situation, I do tend to go with O-rings. So I'm very much open to using both. But I'm curious from you guys, do you have a strong opinion one versus the other? Because I don't think they make a huge, huge difference, assuming that your O-ring is not limiting the performance of your bait because the hole for the O-ring is too small, or your O-ring is basically just oversized for the bait. Because when that happens, you can prevent the bait from running properly. But if you're using the correct size O-ring or using the correct size snap, I don't think it makes a huge difference. But let me know in the comment section what your thoughts are. I know it seems like a small piece of terminal tackle, but it really is an important part to the baits. Not only do either a snap or an O-ring allow the baits to have better movement, they also allow your line ties to be in a better placement. Meaning, if I tried to tie directly to, say, this blade bait, for instance, or if I tied directly to the slobber knocker or a chatterbait, in either one of those cases, yeah, I might get the same vibration out of it until those metal areas wear through my line and it breaks off. So there are different reasons you definitely want to be using a snap or a swivel. And as a whole, as a rule of thumb, I think it's almost always better to tie directly to a snap or an O-ring versus directly to the bait. So, agree or disagree? Let me know in the comment section. I hope you enjoyed today's video. I want to open this up to a good discussion, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you guys have to say. Otherwise, stay tuned for a new video coming out tomorrow. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Stay tuned. New one coming out tomorrow.